Man, it is cold. It is cold this morning. What's up, you guys? Out for another walk. Talk with y'all. It's the middle of April. Yet here in the Pacific Northwest, it feels like it's still wintertime. 37 degrees outside. Chilly with the stiff breeze out here. Just when I thought it was time for spring, nope, Mother Nature had other ideas. Yeah, I'm here to talk about interesting little experience we had yesterday regarding a particular horror film, The Exorcist. And we'll be talking a lot about, this is my favorite genre of films that I've always enjoyed since I was a kid. So to talk about this it's been interesting, to say the least, since it's been kind of this past couple of years. I've been unveiling a lot of my classic favorites over my lifetime, and it's interesting seeing how my kids, who they are 14, almost 15, and 17, how they experience movies and media compared to when I was a kid. There's definitely a difference. And I think it's one of those things where so much of what you experience has to do with what it was like at the time. And you can't take yourself from a time when an experience had an effect on you and expect it to translate the same way to kids or someone much younger who has grown up experiencing a whole different level of technology and media. And I think it makes a big difference on how that perceived experience is for so many reasons. Sorry, Tyler, this is just a YouTube today. No StreamYard, my bad. But you can comment away. Sean says Exorcist was extremely terrifying. I don't know how old you are, but Andrew is an old school horror fan. There you go. Yeah, what's up? Life and Sports Talk with Jake says, you want to talk about scary? The Mariners can't score a dang run, save their life. Yeah, it's a whole nother thing. That's unfortunately the same part, the bad rerun we keep seeing over and over again, that's been plaguing them since who knows how long, last year too, but they just can't put runs on the board, and they're on this 3-game losing streak right now, which was supposed to go this way. Granted, it's only 5 games in, but as we know, even last came down to 1 game or 2 games. So no matter what they say, these games at the beginning count the same as the ones at the end. So they better get their stuff together. They want to live up to the expectations that have been put on them as AL West potential champs. We have a long way to go. Seahawks 1000, what's up? Lori, what's going on? Finally got on here. I haven't seen you in a while. Hated The Exorcist. First scary movie I want to and never again. Never see again. Are they scared by contemporary horror movies? I thought Jeepers Creepers was scary at 10 years old. Jeepers, yeah. So let me give some background for myself, for those of you who don't really know. So as I mentioned, I've been a fan of horror films. I started watching, really my very earliest experience was probably when I was about 3rd or 4th grade, when we got HBO. It was brand new at the time, back in the late 70s. And my parents got HBO for a time, and I remember just watching a handful of horror films that happened to be on. And mostly I just remember imagery from it, but there were a few that really stuck with me. One particular movie called Burnt Offerings was super creepy then. The movie The Car became one of my favorites of all time, just because it was not just that I thought it was scary, but I thought the car was cool. I thought this car was possessed by the devil, driving around killing people. Stupid premise, but at the time it seemed awesome. And a few other movies, that Psychic Killer and some other ones too young to really have been watching these things. Probably had some long-term subtle effects I didn't know about, but I'm still hanging in there. But yeah, so I grew up loving these films. The Exorcist was a movie that I watched for the first time in sixth grade. So this was around 1980. Giving away my age here. But we had a VHS. We had a few people on the block player, and we had a neighbor who had a VHS player, and they had recorded The Exorcist off TV. And I remember her bringing the tape down. We were watching it, and really just kind of flipping through it. We're kind of speeding through the slow parts and get to the good stuff. Man, I was so freaked out because I'd never seen anything like that before. That creepy face of Linda Blair as the character Reagan, who was possessed by the devil in the movie. It was just so scary. The sounds and everything were burned into my brain. And so for a long time, I've always held that movie as a kind of a standard of one of the scariest movies of all time. And at the time that movie came out, that's 1973, mind you. 1973, The Exorcist came out. And it was a movie that, at the time, audiences had never seen anything like that. People were like fainting in the audience or leaving the theater because they couldn't handle the stress and the fear of it. And it actually got nominated for a couple of Oscars. It was actually nominated for Best Picture. I think one of the few times a horror film was nominated for Best Picture. I think Best Sound as well. And it was one of the highest grossing horror films up until 2018 when it came along. Anyway, so it's had its cultural impact and obviously been well spoofed and imitated and many, many, many times over since then. So when I decided to show the girls this movie, I had been working my way up to this one because I showed them a bunch of other horror films. And by the way, if you are a horror film fan, put down in the chat or in the comments what your favorite horror film is or films are, classic or new. It's always fun to hear about maybe movies I haven't seen yet that are worth checking out. There's just so many. But so I grew up in, child of the 80s. So grew up, Exorcist fan, Halloween, Friday the 13th, a whole bunch of slashers, Nightmare on Elm Street. So I've shown my kids a bunch of these movies. A bunch of movies like this, and I really got into them when I started going to movies a lot and watching them with my friends, and we'd make our own horror movies, usually ripping music from Halloween and doing our own versions of it. And so I was just a big fan of it. And then when the VHS home video rental days really blew up in the 80s, we would have these get together Friday night sleepover horror film nights, and we would just go to the local video store and Star Video and these other ones, and basically just find the bloodiest looking box we could find and grab 4 or 5 horror movies and make it a whole horror night. I remember a movie like Wizard of Gore. What was that other one? Not Madman. Madman was one. I Spit on Your Grave. Basket Case. I mean, some of these are really terrible movies, but that's what made it fun. Sometimes the worse they were, the more fun they were to watch. But there were some really good, solid ones that I've put on my list. So when I think about the classics, dating all back to the 70s, I think Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, like I said, Madman, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's longer than this. Shining, Silence of the Lambs. There's no particular order, by the way. I'm just kind of randomly throwing them out there. But, but I love these films and watched them so much that eventually, as some of you know, I went to, later on, back in 2005, co-wrote and directed our own horror film called Frayed, which you can actually find out there. It's on Amazon and YouTube Movies and other places. Frayed. So if you want to check that out, you can. But very inspired by Halloween and several other movies out there. But anyway, so this past year or two, I decided to start showing some of these movies to my kids. And I realized early on, well, first of all, my youngest daughter, Vanessa, she's definitely a tough nut to scare. She has yet to watch even modern films, whether it be Conjuring, The Nun, Annabelle, even the new horror movies don't even really scare her. So when I started to take a walk back memory lane, to show both my kids these old classics, Sophie's a little less tough, but she still is also not easily spooked. But I realized quickly that my kids are definitely kids of the new age. They are grown up on modern day films. And if you compare anything from the 70s or 80s to now, you know right away, as soon as you see the opening shot of whatever it is, you can tell that it's a look of what era it's from. And some of these films, just from whether it's the image quality, the graininess, the sound, sound's a big one. There's a certain sound that things sounded like back in the 70s and 80s. Had this kind of thin, tinny sound, whereas now everything's like full and booming and dynamic. But so my kids are definitely used to the pacing of movies now, and they move at a much different rate. Things happen fast. Back in the 70s, and rewatching Exorcist, and the night before that, we watched The Thing, another one of my classic favorites by John Carpenter, who also directed Halloween. These movies pace very slowly, and I think in both of them, you're probably a good 45 minutes into the movie before anything really exciting starts happening. And you won't find that today in new horror films. I mean, if you don't get to something creepy or some killing within the first 10 minutes, you're already behind schedule. So to have to wait like 45 minutes before things really start to pick up, it's already a test of patience and allowing yourself to watch this development happen and not get bored. A lot of times I can see my youngest Vanessa starting to just yawn and tell she's just like bored waiting for something to get going. Halloween's the same way. That's a real slow burner, but I love that. But I think it's different now. I think the patience of when we were kids, the older generation, compared to the pace that we live in now, where we have this phone in our hands of constant entertainment that you can switch to any number of things at any moment. Back then, when we were watching these things, it was either on TV or on a tape. And you were lucky if you had a tape. A lot of times you just watch it, and it's like you couldn't turn away. Because as soon as it aired, it's like you're watching that frame go by, and if you miss it, it's over. You won't see it again for the next time it shows on TV or cable or whatever you might have. So it's a very different world. I know it's hard to even compare because of the fact that I know with all the technology, there's just a different level of expectation. So it's very tough. Even if I tell my kids, you guys got to watch this, you got to pay attention, try to soak up the atmosphere, because half of the experience of these older movies is trying to soak up these slow scenes, quote, slow scenes that are just meant to build up characters and atmosphere and background story and all that. But unfortunately, I think it's lost on them when it just doesn't seem like it's very interesting, when nothing exciting is happening. That's a tough comparison, but I think it does affect the overall being able to enjoy these films. But so we watched Exorcist last night, and so the first 45 minutes were pretty slow. And then I just realized, when you watch a film that goes from, if you watched all the Star Wars movies, for example, and all the series and spin-offs that have been made, and then you try to go back and watch an old Star Trek or 2001: A Space Odyssey, which at the time was like, never seen anything like that before. It was like first real big space movie about space with stars and ships in it. Even though it moved really slow, you didn't mind because you've never seen anything like this before. But it's, when your kids have grown up on everything with all the technology that these movies bring from the visual effects, you can't go back and watch it and not feel like, man, this looks really lame compared to what people can do today. Even if the filmmaking was still, at the time, state-of-the-art, cutting edge, and brilliant, it just pales by comparison from a technical standpoint. And as with horror and with action and science fiction or science fantasy, these types of movies are heavily affected by those experience factors: sound quality, image quality, quality of effects, believability. And I do know it's hard to shake that when you've seen the best that 2022 has to offer, and you go back 50 years. It's hard to try to appreciate what was good then, because everything was so different about the way movies were put together. Even the acting, it's funny, my kids will talk about, they watch some movies from the really old 70s or 80s, and they'll talk about even just the way of speaking, the way certain actors deliver their lines. There's an 80s way or a 70s way of talking. And if you go back further, like to the Westerns and the black and white films, we were at my parents' house, their Lolo and Lola's house, Kuya Burton, my mom Shoni, they're watching some old Western, I don't know what it was, Gunsmoke or something, and Vanessa was trying to watch it. And it's got the kind of cheesy, dramatic orchestra strings between scenes, but everyone talked with a certain kind of, hey, Bob, when we go into town, we're going to have to face that sheriff. And you know what control he'll be? Well, don't worry. We've got the manpower. I know we can take care of things. It's just, I'm not quoting anything particular, but it's just a certain sound, a certain vocal cadence and delivery that is unique to that era. You don't hear people talk that way in movies. It's funny how there's definitely not only a look and feel to the style of filmmaking, but even the way actors perform. So I was hoping that once Exorcist picked up and we started getting to the good stuff, when she started getting possessed and slowly turning into this devil character, it's amazing. They were really not fazed by it. And I watched the Exorcist TV version first. So I didn't even see the one with all the language and some of the really graphic stuff. But I watched that later and like, whoa, that's really nasty. And then my kids watched it, and it's like, kind of like, yeah, seen that, been there, seen that. But, I know that there's, I think, one point, there's a certain scene where Reagan, the girl, and when she really turns pretty full-on possession, she's doing something with her cross, a crucifix, which I won't spell out for you guys. But it's a pretty iconic moment in the show. And I'm sure at the time when it was done, people must have been flipping out of their minds. But my kids were like, oh, ooh, and that's about it. A little bit of a, ooh, that was kind of gross. And then rolled off their back, moved on. And it's amazing. Maybe it's just kids these days are more desensitized to things. And I think a lot of it is because they have seen other shows which have had plenty of edgy things to where I think they just don't have that problem, that issue with getting scared. I asked Vanessa about it because I think Sophie does have some movies that she'll get scared about. But I said, Vanessa, have you ever seen any movies that ever scared you? She said no. She gets mad at horror movies, actually. She'll get mad. She'll be one of those people who watches a movie and says, oh, yeah, oh, go, smart, yeah, hide under the bed. That's a good idea. I mean, she's just like pissed. Anytime characters do dumb things, and we all know what those horror cliches are: hide in the closet, hide under the bed, split up, go into the dark, don't turn the lights on. You know, all those things that, shoot, I put a lot of that stuff in my own movie. But it's kind of the formula, right? It's just kind of what happens. But Vanessa's feel is like, well, I know it's a movie, so why should I be scared? It's not going to do something to me. I mean, she already has the ability to separate fear of whatever you're watching to something that gets you something inside, which I don't know where she gets that. Definitely didn't get it from me, because I had plenty of freak out moments when I was a kid. And then would creep myself out if I'm walking in the dark or in the house by myself. I'd see Reagan from The Exorcist sitting in the corner, floating towards me. I mean, it was just, somehow she doesn't have that in her. And I realized too, she's also just not one to really fear a lot. She doesn't fear a lot of things in general. So see, we have to be afraid for her sometimes. Like, can I just go jogging around the neighborhood and we'll be the one person going, well, I don't know, I think somebody should go with you, because you never know. It's getting kind of dark out there. You know, so she's the one who rolls her eyes and says, ah. But then you read the real horror stuff that's out there, the news and stories about things that are happening outside in the world to people, everyday kids like your own, things happening to them in their own backyard, in their own house, in their own neighborhood. It's hard not to have some level of fear, but you got to be careful. But that aside, I realized, to my sad conclusion, that I don't think I'm going to ever find a movie that will scare her, where we won't share that same feeling of freaking out and being afraid, because it's just not in her. It's amazing and it's disappointing at the same time, because there's something fun about being able to be fun about being scared, right? Like going on a roller coaster. You love it and you hate it at the same time. Or some really, scary ride that you have to get all the courage to get onto it. Horror movies are that way if done right. Meant to tap into those parts of your brain to get your adrenaline going and your fear, instincts kicking in. It's just not in it for her. At least not when it comes to watching something on a screen. So I think the only thing she hasn't really seen is like these torture porn type shows from very popular back in the 2000s, like Saw and Hostel, and I can't remember any other ones, but there are a bunch of movies that were like that, but they weren't really scary. They're just more like, ooh, how much can you watch? How gross of a torture can you come up with to sick out the audience? So it's not really scary. It's more just trying to make people squirm. That's a lot of people chime in. I used to, Japanese Beast says, getting used to scary movies. I do enjoy watching the horror films. Sinister, I watched that one. It was okay. Show them the YouTube channel, Crypt TV. All right, Andrew. Corvus also says, The Exorcist is not scary. Make them watch Poltergeist. Are you talking about the first one or the new one? I haven't seen the new one. I liked the first one. I wasn't that scared. Maybe I was older too when the original Poltergeist came out, the Steven Spielberg produced one. I haven't shown them that yet, but my feeling is that they're going to have the same reaction. They'll be mildly entertained, but not going to get scared. So I feel like I'd be wasting time. I mean, I could do it just as an exercise for fun, but hard to get these. We're doing these movies because it's spring break right now, so they have some free time, something we don't usually have during the regular weeks. Just sit and watch movies. And you don't even see people for the first 10 minutes in Alien. Alien's great. I love Aliens so much better. But Alien was cool at the time. definitely more of a horror film. Aliens is more of an action film. But you cannot watch Aliens and then go back and watch Alien. You've got to watch those two movies in succession. So if you're ever planning to show somebody those movies, make sure you got to go in order. Otherwise, it's going to be Star Wars and then watching 2001. Just can't do it. How to watch Western Blazing Saddles. Yeah, that'd be interesting to see how they just don't seem to take to the 80s movies very much. The stuff that I thought was cool. Although they did like Ferris Bueller. I think they were mildly entertained by that. Michael says, my friends and I watched this the other day. I don't think there was a single moment we were scared of The Exorcist. Really? I don't know how old you are. It's always part of the context of it all. But weren't you even, like Sophia, the one thinks she did say, there are times when the priest would be like leaning in close to the Exorcist, to the girl. And I remember thinking as a kid, oh, don't go so close to her. And yet, nothing really happened. But it was just the fear of something happening that was scary. But yeah, well, maybe you're like my daughter. Doesn't get scared of Exorcist. Trilogy of Terror scared me, from Patrick. Yeah, they all kind of fall into that. There's a bunch of Trilogy of Terror. There's Nightmares, Creepshow. Oh my gosh, Creepshow. That's another one. That's been another one of my favorites. Creepshow was based on Stephen King. Came out also in the 80s. One of my beloved favorites. Not because it was scary. It really wasn't scary. It was more campy and fun with a little bit of a scare factor to it. But they had a re-showing of that at the Paul Allen-owned theater downtown. And they were having like a retro horror night. And so we brought the kids to it. I think Vanessa fell asleep during it. It was not entertained. I was like, okay, this is not going so well. Cinerama, by the way, is the name of that theater. When it was at the time, I don't even know if it's around. They were talking about that it was getting shut down. But Cinerama was one of the few single screen theaters that kind of held over, mostly because Paul Allen wanted to. When in an age of multiplexes, you don't see single theater screens like they did back in the old days, back in the 70s and 80s, before multiplexes took over. But yeah, so let's see. Event Horizon. I watched that movie. I was more annoyed by that movie. It wasn't scary, but they had so many jump scares that were mostly fueled by just loud musical hits to scare you from sound and not really scare you because it was scary. It was just blast you with this and get a cheap scare off of that. But it's more just like, enough of that. That's annoying. Let's see. The Entity. I remember that one as a kid. That was the story about the woman. I think it's supposedly based on a true story about a woman who was getting raped by a ghost, by a spirit. It's just bizarre. But I watched that. It also was kind of lame. Even at the time, it wasn't even that scary. Wolfen. Yep, that's one Salem's Lot. Creeps me out. I have to look at that again. Again, I don't think, for me, it'd be fun just to look back and watch these horror classics again that I haven't watched in years, some of them. But I don't think my kids would. If Exorcist didn't do anything for them, I don't know how these other films would. The last Evil Dead movie is Andrew. Actually, I think it's brilliant. And they might actually enjoy this one. Evil Dead 2. That thing is cinematic gold. It is one of the most, if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend go watch Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2 is one of the funniest, fascinating, got some scares to it, but it is a roller coaster ride that starts and never stops. Bruce Campbell plays the dude in it. It is so freaking hilarious and jaw-dropping at the same time. You have to watch that film. Evil Dead 2, even if you're not a horror fan. I mean, it's got some squeamish parts, because he'll even, at a certain point, his own body starts to get taken over by his spirit. He has to dismember things to fight off this evil spirit. But you should check it out. It's damn funny. New Poltergeist is pretty good. Okay, didn't watch it. I did watch the clown scene online, so I've seen the clown was creepy in Poltergeist 1 or the original. It looked pretty good too in 2, the new one. Apollonia 143. Remember I said your name? I was thinking of Apollonia, the girlfriend of Prince in Purple Rain. Apollonia says, "Good morning, Nora. Good morning to you. I don't watch horror thriller movies or show at all. I stay far away from them. My dad loves them though. It is I find it fascinating how horror films, they are like carnival ride or thrill rides at the amusement park, because you really can't, there is no in between. You either love them or you hate them, because you don't get someone who goes like, yeah, I kind of like roller coasters. You're pretty much, I love to go on them, or too much for me. And it's very similar to a horror film. That's why I compare them so much in terms of the kind of thrill and emotion it brings out of. Some people just don't want to go to that. They don't want that, take you to that sort of dark, scary place in their brain or body. Hey, rabbit, where'd he go? Oh, bunny. Rabbits. Little bunny. The bunny. Where's the bunny? Where's the bunny? Where's the little bunny? Watch this come. If this is a horror film, bunny would be like rabid and come chasing after me. Yeah, bunny seems to be gone. Bunny, bunny. Where's the little bunny? Okay. Enough of that. Okay. Did that scare you? Good. Green Inferno. I don't even know that one. Rob Zombie does some good scary movies. Yeah, he's all right. Brian Roberts. I've seen Conjuring and Annabelle. Yes, I've seen them both. My kids have seen them too. Again, not scared. At least Vanessa. I don't think Sophie's seen as many of those. Hereditary. I had high hopes for that. Me and my buddies who co-wrote and worked on our film, Frayed, we went and watched that together because we had so much hope for that film. And it was really good for the first 2/3. And then the third act kind of lost it for us. It was like, this is what it is. Yeah. So had some cool things in there, but like so many movies, the third act is kind of the key. Really, the third act is the key to any movie. You've got to bring it together and leave with a good ending. Which I have to say, our movie Frayed, I think we bring it in the third act. That's actually what's cool about our film. Rob Zombie, I already talked about that. Conjuring 2, yeah, had the nun in there. You think they would be scared of The Sixth Sense? We actually watched that film, and they were not scared. I think maybe the most tense part of the movie is when the little kid is taking a pee, and then something moves behind him, and then he goes to the kitchen, and then it's like the abused wife ghost is in there and standing in the hall, and the kid's hiding in his tent. That's probably the most tense part of that movie. But it's really just more of a great film than it is scary. But yeah, they liked it. I showed them Silence of the Lambs thinking at the time, oh boy, I don't know if they can handle it. This is pretty intense. They watched it. It's like, man, that's when I realized, man, I can't phase them. Showed them The Shining. I always thought that was creepy. Nope, didn't phase them. So, yeah, I think that ship has sailed. Pet Cemetery by TJ. I don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery. I don't want to live my life again. Remember that scene? That's from the first one. They redid that one too. And I did see the remake. I'm not a big fan of the remakes of classics. I think part of me is because I just want to hold on to my memory of the originals and not watch some souped up version. And so I have not seen the new one. Don't know if it's better or not. The first one wasn't even that great. wasn't even that scary. It was okay. Saw that in 1987, I think. But yeah, Hellraiser. Yeah, I watched those too, and they weren't scary. They were kind of just fun, but wasn't really scared in that. But obviously a very iconic look. That was one of the coolest characters ever, with all the pins in his head. Awesome costume design. Do you remember Deadly Eyes in the 80s? Is where rats invaded a small town. Oh man, there was that time, more like I think 70s, I guess some early 80s, but the whole creature attacking, insects revolting against humanity. There was a bunch of those. A lot of them in the 50s too, but redone in the 70s. I remember these are the ones I watched on HBO when we had that cable, as I was mentioning before. Empire of the Ants, Food of the Gods. There's a Killer Bees one. There's something else. Some other bug. Oh, Kingdom of the Spiders. Kingdom of the Spiders. I thought that was scary. It's just laughable now. But it had William Shatner. Captain Kirk was in it. And he's acting like Captain Kirk in it. But I remember I wanted to believe it so much. I think I wanted it to be scary. So in my mind, I made it scarier, even though it really wasn't. But this whole idea that a bunch of tarantulas were attacking this town and basically cocooned the whole city up to be food for them. It's really a ridiculous premise when you think about it, because tarantulas don't even barely move. This is actually before I think they had spider rights activists, because in this movie, I remember there's a whole scene where they had this whole city's under attack, and this sheriff or deputy comes riding in this police car, and there's tarantulas all over the road, and he's running them over one after another, just splat. You see their guts squirting out. I mean, they were killing tarantulas. Clearly, it was before they had any rules about you can't kill insects, you can't kill humans and animals, and you can't kill spiders either. But yeah, so the whole idea that you could have a bunch of tarantulas attack you, because really all you gotta do is run. I mean, the only way they could get you is if you are laying there and a whole bunch of them get dumped on you at once, or you trip and fall into a nest of them or something. But really, if there was a bunch of tarantulas right there, I would just, okay, I'll walk over here then. It's not that hard to get away from a bunch of spiders. Now, as far as, the birds, that's Hitchcock. There's another one of animals revolting against humans. Classic Hitchcock. But even those movies definitely have a dated feel to it. Woo! There's a crow. Speaking of a bird. Oh, there he is. Going to that tree right there. Ah! 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 I like messing around with the animals. I don't do nothing to them. I just yell at them and stuff. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, animals. Animal killing things. Killing people. So there's a time when that was popular. There was this one horror film. It was actually, it was on TV, made for TV horror film. It was called, and it was about a guy who bred and captured snakes, but he takes this guy in as like an apprentice, and then he does this experiment, turns him into a snake. He injects him with some kind of thing to turn him into a snake. And at the very end, he becomes an actual snake. He's, slowly gets scales, his color changes. And at the end, I just remember the girlfriend freaking out, ah! And the snake is like running around or slithering around on the ground, and people are trying to kill it. Anyway, dumb movie. I'm sure it's totally goofball now, but at the time, it was kind of creepy. North by Northwest, Outbreak. Oh, Outbreak. That's a good one to watch it's like pre-COVID. Had a COVID vibe to it. Empire of the Ants. Yeah, Food of the Gods. As a kid, wasn't scared of them. Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever mentioned that they've seen those movies. Because I remember watching them at the time, and it looked bad then, right? I remember just the effects were super cheesy. Clearly, these puppet things that they were using, wasn't even effective, but it was. You try to convince yourself that it's pretty good. Andros says, me and my buddies Anthony and Quentin D. We've made Nerf movies with zombies since 2013. That would be scary. Nerf guns with zombies. That would be unique. Session 9. I don't know about Session 9. That doesn't sound familiar. Oh, and of course, Jaws. Now, you still watch that now, and yeah, there's some dated aspects, but they did a great job of creating a lot of it with tension, with not seeing the creature, right? A lot of times it's just the barrels that's dragging on the surface of the water, and when it's underwater, it's more scary, or you see the fin. And then, of course, the music, the great musical score from John Williams. Yeah, that's, of course, a great movie. The Duel by Steven Spielberg, early 70s film. I think right after getting out of film school or something. But that's an early horror suspense thriller. Yep, we watched the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I thought they would be creeped out by that. Nope. They liked it a little bit, but overall, mildly entertained at best. Anyway, that's the end of this walk talk. There's so much more going on. I do wanted to remind you guys, we are doing a 1-round mock draft tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And if you want to participate, I think there's a couple more teams that we need GMs for. So join the Discord, discord.gg/Seahawks if you want to participate in it. But it starts at 6 o'clock Pacific time, 9 o'clock Eastern. And yeah, we're just going to simulate, and the fellas on Discord are going to help run it. So it's going to be fun to check out. All right. You guys have a great day. It's fun chatting with you about horror films. The sad demise of the scare of old horror films, at least in my household. All right. You guys have a great day. We'll talk to you all later. Bye. Go Seahawks.